When I was in middle school, I learned how to type. We had to. We were tested on it. We had classes. And I remember, they gave us a couple new letters every week, and we really learned to stare and feel and stare and feel, and they'd cover up the keyboard over our fingers at some point. We had to learn how to type by memory. But for whatever reason, we didn't have to do that with the numbers. We weren't tested on it, and I never learned it. I got quite good at typing with letters. I can get my thoughts out quickly and clearly without many mistakes, and I never learned to type those numbers. I just realized this last year, that every time I had to type a number, I'm looking down. For over 30 years, or roughly 30 years, I have stared at the keyboard to type those numbers because I never challenged myself to do it any differently. In this case, I challenge you to learn to see in the darkness that spiritual resonance lives in. When someone only knows how to see within a certain range of reality, see, sense, recognize, stimuli within a certain range, that's not going to get better unless you put your attention, your commitment into learning. Without that knowledge, there's a vast range of things that you can't take on. As a practical example, when we go through emotional transformations, they all have a vibration to them. They all have a core resonance. That resonance can be understood as akin to a radio station. You need to tune into that resonance in order to experience something emotionally. This is true of everyone. It's always been true. Every time you have grieved in your life, there's a vibration under that grief that you're essentially on. You're occupying it, you're expressing it, and as it lives through you, you cry, and it can complete. There's a cycle to it that will end, and this resonance will calm down and integrate into your system. However, it's perfectly possible to experience the beginning signs of grief and to clamp them. Many people do this. They're uncomfortable, they're threatening, they defy your sense of self. I'm a man, I don't cry. Who knows? For whatever reason, people will clamp strong emotions. When they clamp that vibration down, stop it, it takes an enormous amount of energy. This is your energy to begin with, and the clamping is your energy, and that struggle becomes a part of someone's life. This is akin to a spiritual choice being made unconsciously out in the darkness, away from the light of what you know how to see and recognize. And then, having made that choice, you forget about it. Just go on, plow through, ignore it, don't acknowledge or honor the process of grieving. And as a result, this doesn't change. It just becomes somewhat normal to be numb and have tension and struggle in your system. When this occurs and people eventually begin to suffer strange, inexplicable physical or mental emotional symptoms, the tendency in our culture is to measure the inexplicable mental or emotional symptoms to try to find the things that we know how to see under the light of our current knowledge and only work with that. It seems to make sense, and yet to every extent that the problem is actually caused out here through a lack of attentiveness to the grieving process, it's never going to work. Never going to work. Because this tension is happening on an energetic level, and it'll ripple into physicality. Eventually, it'll start to create a bad back. Once it creates a bad back, if you only work with the back, you're not working with the root of the problem. And as a result, maybe you have surgery to fix a torn ligament or an hypertension in a muscle, but this hasn't disappeared. And so you are essentially settling for a much worse life where an enormous amount of energy gets wasted. And the medical response is to essentially numb you. It's not going to fix the root of the problem. This is why I challenge you to learn with a spiritual intensity and a deep emotional and mental commitment to understand energetic resonance, vibration. In the worst case scenario, there's going to be a whole series of choices that you've made that are latent in your system, stuck, wasting your spirit, that you will learn how to take on and see. And it's tempting to avoid this challenge because it is unpleasant. We've often made a mess in this area of our consciousness, and it's not particularly fun to go into that mess. It's easier to avoid it. And yet you are suffering the consequences of that avoidance, which is the first reason I challenge you to take it on. And the second is that it's extremely joyful to learn to take on a whole new level of influence over your life. The same techniques that are necessary to take on the challenges that have been unconsciously created can be used to intentionally empower your system to do much better in a wide range of life. And that is one of the greatest gifts of this work. Wildflower Fire will help you face the dysfunction and difficulty that has been latent or a constant presence in your life, and then go further and take you into the challenge to live a more creative and joyful life. Empowered, alive, physically strong, making great choices in how you tend your body and how you express yourself in the world.